This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning, Rabbi Glatstein. Afrelich and Shushan Purim, Bruchim Aboim to the Kollel Agra de Perkel here in Kew Garden Hills, New York. And today is the day after Purim. It's also at the beginning of the Shloshim Yom before Pesach. And even though everybody's still cleaning up after Purim, you're going to come home, you're going to find Laffy Taffies under the table. The house still has shachmanis everywhere, but it's time to begin the Pesach cleanup. But before we could begin preparing for Pesach, I think the first thing we have to determine are certain Yahrtzeits. And that, as we know in Judaism, Yahrtzeits are very significant. Even though there's a sort of a misnomer, and that is, people think that on a Yahrtzeit you don't say Tachnon. Actually, it's just the opposite. According to Shulchan Aruch, on a Yahrtzeit of a tzaddik, not only do you say Tachnon, you fast. It's brought down in Shulchan Aruch, the Yahrtzeit of Moshe, the Yahrtzeit of Aaron, the Yahrtzeit of Yeshua, the Yahrtzeit of many tzaddikim. There's a siman in Shulchan Aruch that whenever it's a Yahrtzeit of a tzaddik, you actually fast. Okay. But be it as it may, even those who mistakenly think that you don't say Tachnon, I think everybody would agree that on a Yahrtzeit of a Rasha, you for sure should not say Tachnon. After all, that's the downfall of the Rasha, right? So I think before we begin preparing for Pesach, we have to determine a very important Yahrtzeit, and that is Haman's Yahrtzeit. When is Haman's Yahrtzeit? So you say, what's the nafkamina? Nafkamina would be, when should you not say Tachnon, right? Because I think everyone would agree on the Yahrtzeit of Haman, you shouldn't say Tachnon, right?
Since when you are making Yahrtzeit of a non-Jew?
You know, a Rasha like Haman, I think you shouldn't say Tachnon. And you'll see, I think I'm right, that on Haman's Yahrtzeit we don't say Tachnon. Okay, so let's look in the Megillah. The Megillah says, Lech kenois es kol hayudim. Let's go and gather all of the Jews. We know that the letters were written and were read to eradicate Chas V'Shalom Klal Yisrael. Vayikaru Sofrei HaMelech B'chodesh Harishayin, right? Vayikaru Sofrei HaMelech B'chodesh Harishayin B'shloisha Asar Yahayim B'ay, right? Vayikasev Chasher Tziva Haman, right? So on the 13th day of the first month, the letters went out that in a year's time the Jewish people would be Lahashmid Lara Gileabed on Yud Gimel Adar. So in about 11 months from them, so that those were the first letters. And those letters, according to Kuliyama, went out on the 13th day of Nisan. It's interesting that this pasuk is the second to longest pasuk in the Tanakh. It's in Parak Gimel pasuk Yud Beis. Vayikaru Sofrei HaMelech b'chodesh Harishayin v'shlosh asar yoim b'ay vayikasev k'chash hatziva Haman elachash dar b'nei HaMelech v'avas. So they went out on the 13th day of Nisan. What's very strange is, firstly, the longest pasuk in Tanakh, and that is the exact same pasuk, but when the story turns, Vayikaru Sofrei HaMelech b'chodesh Harishayin, which it has 43 words in it. And that pasuk says that Mordechai sort of changed the text of the document, that instead of the Jews Chas V'Shalom being killed on the 13th day of Adar, instead we would be able to kill our enemies. What's very strange is that when did the second letter go out? The second letters went out. Vayikaru Sofrei HaMelech b'chodesh hashlishi hu chodesh Sivan. On the 23rd, right? So that means the first letters went out to eradicate the Jewish people on the 13th day of Nisan. The letters were rescinded on the 23rd day of Sivan. How many days later is that? That's 70 days later. So what in the world took so long? Think about the chronology of what happened. We'll see. The entire Purim story took place over the course of 3 days. So from the time that the letters went out to destroy Klal Yisrael and the fasting, Haman's already dead 67 days before. Why did Mordechai wait another 67 days before he sent out letters retracting the first letter? He should have sent out immediately. Okay, the game is over. We're going to kill you. What took another 67? The first letters they got out in a cinch. It's not like when Achshverosh wants to get out a letter, it takes time to send it out. When he wants to get out a letter, he sends it out immediately. So why the first letters went out on the 13th day of Nisan, and the second letters, the 23rd day of... What's going on? What took so long? Okay, so we got to get some history over here. So let's see the chronology of what took place. So Esther says, Leich kenoises kol haYehudim.
There's a question here.
Go and gather the Jews, hanimtzaim b'Shushan, that are found in Shushan, v'tzumo alai, and fast. V'al toichlu v'al tishtu, don't eat, don't drink, shloshas yamim laila v'yom. 3 days, day and night, or night and day. Gaman even our Atzim Kain will also fast. Uv'chein ova yal hamelech asher lo chadas. V'chasher avadati avadati. Fine. Now, if you were to ask me, when did they fast? Either they fasted the 13th, the 14th, or the 15th, or they fasted the 14th, the 15th, and the 16th. It doesn't say. And then the pasuk says, Vayavar Mordechai, and Mordechai passed. Vayas, and he did, K'chayla Shar Tzivsa Olav Esther, everything that Esther commanded him. What did Mordechai pass? Well, he passed his road test. What did he pass? So it's a machlokes in the Gemara in Megillah on Daf Tes Vav. So the Gemara says, Vayavar Mordechai, Mordechai passed. Amar Rav Shehevir Yom Rishon Shel Pesach Batainis. He passed the first day of Pesach in fasting, meaning he violated. He was over. Mordechai was over an Aveira. What was the Aveira? On Yom Tif you need to eat, and Mordechai did not eat on Yom Tif. He did not fast on the first day of Pesach. He fasted, right? He didn't eat on the first day of Pesach. So let's try to get the chronology. When were these 3 days? So the letters went out on the 13th. So look at Rashi. Rashi says, Vayavar Mordechai. Mordechai was over al das. He violated the religion. Mordechai violated the religion, L'hisanois, v'yom tov rishon shel Pesach, to fast on the first day of Pesach. Shehisana, listen to Rashi. Apparently the letters went out on the 13th, so he fasted on the 14th, v'tesvav the 15th, v'tezayin the 16th, Sharei b'yom yud gimel nichtavu hasfarim. So the letters were written on the 13th, and according to Rashi on Megillas Esther, Mordechai fasted on the 14th, the 15th, and the 16th. And Memela Chazal say, Vayavar Mordechai. Mordechai was over. What was he over? He was over the first day of Yom Tif. Why? Because he didn't eat.
And the second.
He was in Gogos. And then the second set of years.
He was over the first day of Pesach B'tainis. Well, the first thing you have to know is Mordechai was from Yerushalayim, so somebody from Yerushalayim living in Bavel temporarily, Lav Dafki has to keep 2 days. That's halbatzar, as they say. Here's the question: what are Chazal saying about Mordechai? He was over the first day of Pesach. Why? Because he fasted. You're not allowed to fast on Yom Tif. You're not allowed to fast on Yom Tif. You're allowed to fast on Shabbos. If somebody has a Tainis Chaloim, he's allowed to fast on Shabbos. Are you allowed to fast on Yom Tif? We paskin not. There is a day you're allowed to. So, okay, maybe it's better not to. The Iker Nakuda that Rashi should say, and that the Gemara should say, is not that he was over the first day B'tainis. It should say he was Mavatel the Mitzvah Sasei Dairaisa V'achilas Matzah. Why are we picking on some Chumrah that Mordechai fasted on Yom Tif? So what he fasted on Yom Tif? The Iker thing here is that Mordechai did not eat matzah on the first day of Pesach. Why don't Chazal say that? What do you mean? Why Vayavar Mordechai that he fasted? It should say that he didn't eat matzah.
He eat in the evening.
He what? Shloishes Yamim.
No, he ate already. He was Yotze. I'm sorry.
It's not Ramadan,
Another question. What do you mean Vayavar Mordechai? Lech Kino, he says, Kol HaYehudim. What are you blaming Mordechai? He's the only guy fasting. It's the entire Klal Yisrael's fasting. All of the Jewish people. So it should say, Vayavar HaYehudim. Why Vayavar Mordechai? Why are we picking on Mordechai? So these are two kashas we're going to see that are asked by the Rebbe, Rabbi Yonasan. Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshutz. There are not so many people in history that are called the Rebbe, Reb. Who do we have? You have the Rebbe, Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshutz. And they all share, only one of them was Hasidic. The Rebbe, Reb Shmelka, he was Hasidic. And the Rebbe, Reb Heschel. For Yei Shoimrim, some say Reb Bunim. Reb Simcha Bunim Mipshischa. But anyway, be it as it may, this is the kasha of Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshutz in the Yahrtzeit in Drush Tes, Amud Kufnon Aleph. That first of all, why do Chazal say that Mordechai fasted? They should say better that he didn't eat matzah. And even more than that, why are we saying Mordechai fasted? What about the rest of Klal Yisrael? Okay, so let's try to get the chronology straight. Hopefully by next year when we lay in the Megillah, maybe we'll know a little bit what we're talking about. So the letters went out on the 13th. And according to Rashi on the Megillah, they fasted the 14th, the 15th, and the 16th. And Vayihi Bayom HaShlishi Vatilbash Esther Malchus. Look in number 1, Parakeh Pasagav. On the third day, Esther wore Malchus. Patsha Pshat Vayihi Bayom HaShlishi Vatilbash Esther Malchus is she went on the third day of the fast, right? So that means, according to Rashi, she went on the 16th, on the second day of Pesach, and she came and she had her party with Achashverosh. And what did she say? She went into Achashverosh, and she said, what did she ask for when she came in on that third day? She said, please come to a party today. No, it doesn't.
No, the first one.
She came in, and Vatilbash Malchus, and she said, do me a favor, I want to make a party today. And then she went into the party on that day. And what did she ask on that day? She said,
Come tomorrow again. Join home.
You, do me a favor, I want you and Haman to come to a party that I make today. So the king said, Maharu has Haman, and on that party, on that day, she said, do me a favor, come to a party tomorrow. Okay, so that means, when is tomorrow? Tomorrow is the 17th. That night, what happened to Achashverosh that night? Achashverosh couldn't sleep. What night was that?
The 17th going.
The night? No. The night of the 17th.
16th going.
No, it's in for us Jewish people, the night is the day, right? So
first of all, when she went on the
she went on the third day. So that's the 14th, the 16th.
She went on the 16th.
16th.
She had a party the 16th.
And she said, come to a party with Haman later today, later on the 16th. That night, that party, she said, come tomorrow to a party with Haman. That night, Achashverosh couldn't sleep. That's the night of the 17th. The next morning, Haman wakes up early in the morning, and he comes into the king's palace, and the king says, I have a guy that I need to honor, I never honor him, what would you do? And Haman said, bring the royal clothing and the royal horse, and parade him through the streets, and Achashverosh says, you go lead. So he's leading Mordechai through the streets when? On the 17th. Now the Gemara says, we'll deal with that in a minute, and they come to the party, and Haman takes his misstep with Esther, and Achashverosh is fuming, and Haman is hanged. So according to this, when was Haman hanged? On the 17th. So that's the timeline according to Rashi. That the letters went out on the 13th, they fasted 14, 15, 16. On the 16th, Esther went in, invited Achashverosh to a party later. That day, she invited him for a party tomorrow. That night, the night of the 17th, he couldn't sleep, and Haman is then hanged on the 17th. Let's look at Rashi on Shas. Rashi in Shas says Yom Tov Rishon Shal Pesach. Shaharei look at number 4. Shaharei b'shloisha asar b'Nisan nichtavu ha'igros. On the 13th, the letters were written. V'nitan hadas b'Shushan, and the verdict was issued. V'arba asar, v'chamisha asar, v'shisha asar hisanu. They fasted 14, 15, 16. So Rashi should say that when was Haman hanged? 17th. Uv'shisha asar nisle Haman ba'erev. And on the 16th, Haman was hanged in the evening.
Which is the 17th. Could be the 17th.
Now, first of all, he was not hanged on the 16th. He was hanged on the 17th. And if he was hanged in the evening, then it would come out, it was the 18th. Because we know he was hanged on the second party. And the second party was the 17th. So you'll say it was still before Shkia. Fine, but it's the 17th. So the Masoras Hashas, look at number 5, says, Nisla Haman Be'erev, Ratzaloim Be'erev Achar Yom Shisha Asar. It doesn't mean the evening of, it means the evening, the late afternoon of the day after the 16th, the 17th. Okay? So right now we're learning the chronology as follows. The letters went out on the 13th, they fasted 14, 15, 16, and Haman was hanged when? Not exactly as Rashi says on the 16th, he means the day after the 16th, which is the 17th. That means Haman's Yahrtzeit is what? 17th. The Taga comes out beautiful. We don't say Tachnon on the 17th day of Nisan, because, of course, that's Haman's Yahrtzeit, so we wouldn't say Tachnon on the 17th day, the Yahrtzeit of Haman. Okay, so far everything works out based on this premise that we're not going to say Tachnon on the Yahrtzeit of a guy like Haman. Okay.
Don't we call the second Seder Shiur?
Do we? The second Seder.
Mixing something up?
Maybe not. Let's see. Let's see.
We don't say Tachnon.
We don't say Tachnon on the 17th day of Nisan. Most Jews, most Yidden don't say Tachnon on the 17th day of Nisan.
They also don't say it on the first.
1 second. Right now, let's not get confused with other days on the calendar. But let's talk about the chronology. So right now we have Haman's Yahrtzeit marked on the 17th. There's a Gemara Megillah Daf Tez Zayin. Take a look at number 6. So right now, when did Haman dress Mordechai to prepare him to be paraded through the streets? It was the 17th. So look at number 6. Vayikach Haman es alavosh v'yasasos. Azal ashkechei diyasi rabbanan kameh. Haman found that the rabbis were sitting before Haman. Umachvi lehu hilchos kmitza. For Mordechai. Oh, good.
It's okay.
Mibnei banav shel Haman learned in Torah b'nei Rak. Yeah, they found that the rabbis were sitting before Mordechai. Umachvi lehu hilchos kmitza. And Mordechai was teaching them the laws of kmitza l'rabbanan. Kivin the chazia Mordechai the apik lekivlei v'susei mecha biyadei. When Mordechai saw that Haman was sort of rushing to him with his horse, Mirsis, Mordechai was shaking. Amrahul Rabbana, he said to the other Rabbanan, Hi Rishil Mikdo Nafshi Kasi, this guy, Haman, came to kill me. Zilu Mikame, get out of here. Diloi Sichva Begachate, so you're not burnt by his coals. Vahi Shaita, at that moment, Nisatef Mordechai. Mordechai wrapped himself in his talus, for Kamei Letzahus, and he started to daven. Also, Haman v'yasav le'kamayu. Haman sat before him patiently. V'arich adasala. Haman waited until Mordechai finishes the Shemana Esrei. Let's just say, Amar lehu b'mayaskisu. Haman said, "No, what sugya you're learning?" Now, I didn't realize that Haman was interested. What sugya? That's what he asked. Amar le bisman shbeis hamikdash kayam man demenadav mincha ma'isi maloi kumtzi desulto meskaperle. That somebody who is menadev a mincha, he would bring a kaimetz full of soilas, and he would be niskaper. Amar lehu, so Haman said, Asa malai kumtzi kimcha didchu, the kaimetz full of kemach that you have came along, v'dachi asara alfi kikri kasvadidi, and pushed away my 10 kikar of silver. In other words, in the zchus that you're learning hilchos kmitza, you have merited to push off my decree. So, Vashem Yoyer Einai, that it's an amazing thing. If you look in Parshas Emor, which is the Parsha of the Moyadim, so you have all the Moyadim. It starts with Pesach, and it goes to Shavuos, and then it goes to Rosh Hashanah, and it goes to Yom Kippur, and it goes to Sukkot. the question is, so no, where's Chanukah, where's Purim? We say there's not a kasha, those are mitzvahs Torah, they're not going to be in there. And yet the Rokeach says, if you look right after, Vayidaber Moshe Mayad Hashem Levnei Yisrael, right after that is, V'yikoylach Hashem and Zayisach, which is a remez to Chanukah. So the question is, and where's the remez to Purim? So it comes out very beautiful based on the Gemara that we just read. Right after Tzavis Meisav Yikoylach Hashem Zayisach, V'lakachta Soiles. How is that a remez to Purim? According to this Gemara, in the Zechus of Malay Kumse de Sulta, for the koimets full of Soiles, you pushed off my decree that I made with the 10 kikar of silver. Okay, fine. But here's the problem. The Gemara seems to be saying, look at Rashi, Doiresh bin Yanoi Shoyim. Why was Mordechai teaching the laws of Kmitza? He was teaching the laws of the Yomer. Because on what day is the Yomer brought? 16th. On the 16th. It was the 16th day of Nisan. 16th day of Nisan? No, it wasn't. It was the 17th day of Nisan. The cheshbon doesn't work out. The letters went out on the 13th. They fasted 14, 15, 16, which would then mean that Esther went in on the 16th, invited Haman to the party on the 17th. That means Haman found Mordechai learning Hilchos Kmitza on the 17th. And here Rashi saying the 16th.
Why can we say that the first on the 13, 14, and 15?
Oh, could we say that?
Yeah, why not?
That could be right.
Again, yeah, you're right. So,
This is Rashi.
So it's a very good point. This Gemara, and the way Rashi on Daf Tezayin learns, Rashi seems to be pushing everything a day earlier. So in other words, that means the second party was on the 16th. That means the first party and the third day was the 16th. That means they fasted when? 15, 14, and 13. Right? Again, but that's not like Rashi, not on his commentary to Megillas Esther, and not like Rashi in his commentary to Daf Tezvav. So what you have really is a stira in Rashi's, because it's the same Rashi. Rashi himself said in Shas 14, 15, 16, and Rashi here says they were learning Hilchos Kmitza, Mein Yana Shel Yom. So it's very difficult to reconcile the two Rashis. Okay, but it's a good point. But let's try to come up with a mahalach here. Let's find something that works. Obviously 14, 15, 16 is not going to work here. Because then Haman was hanged on the 17th. They were learning Hilchos Kmitza the wrong day. So let's say that they fasted 13, 14, and 15. Could we say such a thing? We can. In fact, the Medrash in two places learns that way. That they fasted on the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th. Look at number 8. Batoimer Esther lahashav el Mordechai. Amralai, she said to him, Lech kenoises kol haYehudim. Go and gather the Jews. Hanimtzeim b'Shushan. V'tzumu alai. V'al toichlu, v'al tishtu. Shloishas yamim. Elu hein shloisha asar. V'arba asar. V'chamisha asar b'Nisan. What days did they fast? 13, 14, 15. Shalach la. So Mordechai sends to her, V'harei bohem yom rishon shel Pesach. Mordechai says, we can't fast 13, 14, 15. The third day is the first day of Pesach. Amrullah, she said back to him, Zakin shivso lamu Pesach. Old man, what do we need Pesach for if we're all going to die? Miyad shama Mordechai v'hoidil v'areh. Mordechai listened to her psak. Hadahu dechsiv. V'yavar Mordechai v'yaskach asher tzivsa alav Esther. Taman amrin shehever yom tov shel Pesach b'tainis. Or look in the Pirkei de Rebbe Lazar. Amrullah, she said to him, Lech kenoises kol haYehudim hanimtzim b'Shushan v'tzumu alai v'yal toichlu v'yal tishtu shloishes yamim laila v'yayim v'elu hein shloisha asar v'arba asar v'chamisha asar b'Nisan. Amrullah Mordechai said to her, V'halo yom shlishi yom Pesachu. But the third day is Pesach. So here it says clearly the third day of the fast was the 15th. Amrullah, she said, Ata rosh Sanhedrin, you're the head of Sanhedrin. V'ata omer davar zeh. You don't have any seicha v'mein Yisrael l'miyah Pesach. If there's no Jews, who's going to keep Pesach? So Shama Mordechai Svarel v'asik chashat tzivasu. He listened to whatever she commanded. Shenemar v'yavar Mordechai v'yaskach chashat tzivsa alav Esther. Okay, so according to this version, The letters went out on the 13th. That means they fasted what? 13, 14, 15. And Haman's Yahrtzeit will be when? 16th. And Taka, we also don't say Tachnan on the 16th day of Nisan either. So both ways, we're machmer on both pshatim. We don't say Tachnan on either possible Yahrtzeit for Haman. You know, Baruch Hashem, things work out. Now, I'll ask you a question on this, because if the 3 days of fasting were 13, 14, 15, and the letters went out on the 13th, that means the fast of the 13th was not Laila V'Yom. Right? It wasn't Laila V'Yom. So anyway, there happens to be a Chasam Sofer in Masechet Avodah Zarah who says that when we say Shloshes Yomim Laila V'Yom, it's Lav Dafka Shloshes Yomim, because it's impossible to fast 3 days, night and day. Anyway, you can't live.
What about Yahrtzeit Yom Kikulo?
No, okay, so but here, yeah, fine, we would say that, but it says Laila V'Yom, you know?
Implicit.
Yeah, so the Chasam Sofer says Laila V'Yom only means the middle day. Because otherwise it's physically impossible to fast 3 days. So it would be the first day of the day, the second day, night and day, and the third day as well. So Mor Rabbi, we have two possible ways to determine the chronology here. One way is, the letters went out on the 13th. They fasted 14, 15, and 16, and then you could technically say it was 72-hour fast. And if you say that, it would come out that the first party was the 16th, the second party was the 17th, and Haman was hanged on the 17th. That happens not to work well with the Gemara that says they were learning Hilchos Kmitza. The Gemara that says they were learning Hilchos Kmitza fits better if you say that they fasted when the second party was the 16th, and that means the 3 days of fasting were 15, 14, and 13, and the same days the letters went out. Here's the problem. Here's the $1 million question. Look at number 11. On the words Balayla Hahu Nadid Shnas HaMelech, the Targum says as follows, and there are many midrashim that say this, and we mention it Leil Seder. What night of the year was the Balayla Ahu Nadida Shnas HaMelech? What night is Nadida Shnas Malkui Shalaylam? Chazal say it was the night of Pesach. It was Leil Shimurim. Look at the Targum. Beibelel Yahahu Nadas Shinsa de Malka. On that night, what night was that? Beibelel Yahu Nefak Por Kanu Lidoi, the night of redemption. Beibelel Yitzkara Sarah Lebeis Avimelech. Sarah had her episode with Amelech. So the Targum says explicitly, it was the night of Yitzias Mitzrayim. That was the night that Achashverosh could not sleep. That Rebbeinu Shalom cannot sleep. Wait a second. We know the night he couldn't sleep was the night between the two parties. The night after the third day of fast. So let's make a cheshbon. If the three fasts were 14, 15, 16, then what night was Balayla Hu Nadid Shnas HaMelech? 17. Okay, so it's not going to work with Rashi on the Megillah and Rashi on Shas. Maybe it will work with Esther Rabbah and Pirkei Rebbe Lezer. When did they fast? 13, 14, 15. What night was the Balayla Hu Nadid Shnas HaMelech? 16. So it doesn't work not according to nobody. This medrash that Balayla Hu Nadid Shnas HaMelech doesn't fit into any way that you learn the three fasts. So how do you reconcile this? Presumably, again, on the third day of the fasting, Esther said, come to a party I'm going to make today with Haman. They came to the party. That night, Achashverosh could not sleep because he's thinking, why'd she invite Haman? What'd she have with Haman? And then that morning Haman comes, and that sort of confirms the fear in Achashverosh's mind. So how do we reconcile this? Look in the Marsha. The Marsha, Masechet Megillah says, because of this kasha, Ein mukdam u'meuchar b'story. That the Balayla Hu Nadid, the whole everything in the Megillah, the way we set it up, it's completely discombobulated. There is no chronology. Look how he says it. He says, Venira, okay, Vayavar Mordechai, Yom Aleph the Pesach, Uperish Rashi, Shaharei b'Yod Gimel, Uv'Yod Vav, Nisla Haman ba'Erev. Venira lefi Inyanoi, D'B'Yom Rishon, Shehesanu, Dahainu b'Yod Daled, Ba Esther lefnei HaMelech, Bovosh Malchus. The third day is not the 16th, like Rashi and the Megillah says. The Rashi and the Megillah says 14, 15, 16. It's not, like the Medrash says, 13, 15. The third day is the 14th. How's that? The day that Esther came before the king, Bavush Malchus, had to be the 14th. You know how we know that? Because it says, Balayla hu nadadosh nasa melech, and every medrash in the world says that night was Pesach. So she must have come on the 14th. Rashi says, that's the 15th of the Shiluach HaRotzim. So the Marsha says you have to say Ein Muktam Ma'ucher. You have to say that the Maisa of Alayla Hu Nadadosh Nas HaMelech was before Esther came into him on the third day. Obviously, this is not how we normally learn Megillas Esther. We normally learn Megillas Esther. She came in, and that night he couldn't sleep. Says the Marsha, we're forced to say that she came in the day after he couldn't sleep the night before. And Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshutz says that's very doichek. That's not the simple way of reading the Psukim. So if you're going to read the Psukim Kepashte, if you're going to read the Psukim in the simple way, now the question is, whether they fasted 14, 15, 16, then it comes out that he couldn't sleep the night of the 17th. If you're going to say they fasted 13, 14, 15, that means he couldn't sleep the night of the 16th. But neither is reconciled with the concept that Achashverosh did not sleep and the Rebbeinu Shalom was Nadada the night of Yetzias Mitzrayim. So let me introduce what Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshutz says with another piece in Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshutz that you don't have on the sheet. It's not, by the way, if you want to look up what I'm saying now, it's in the same chelek, it's in Drush Tes, and it's on page Kuf Mem Zayin, Kuf Mem Ches, if you want to look it up. Haman made the decree for Adar. Haman made the decree for Adar. Which Adar? Which Adar?
You put fly in the ointment.
The second Adar or the third Adar? Just joking. I'm joking.
Oh.
Which Adar? The first Adar or the second? Say, I don't know, was it a Muberas? You'll say, who cares?
70 days.
The Yushalmi says in Parak Aleph Halacha Hey, right, there's a question. If you have two Adars, which Adar do you lay in the Megillah?
Second.
The second. Why? It's machlokes. Do we say Zriza Makdim L'Mitzvahs, or do you say what? Do you say Ein Mavrin Asam Mitzvahs, or do you say Mesamchinon Gula L'Gula? And we paskin Mesamchinon Gula Gula. If you look in the Yushalmi in Parak Aleph Halacha Hey says, you know why you lay in the Megillah in the second Adar? Because the year of the Purim story, there were two Adars, and the miracle occurred in the second Adar. So Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshutz says, what do you mean there are two Adars? There's a halacha that we don't make a second Adar before Rosh Hashanah. That means the Gemara says in Masechta Sanhedrin Daf Yud Beis, and in many places, that we're not ma'aver the year before Rosh Hashanah unless you have a tzarech gadol. So if that's the case, Haman made the gzeira on Yud Gimel Nisan. For what? For the following Yud Gimel Adar. Now, it wasn't an Ibriyar yet, right? And yet, Haman made a Stam Gezerah on Adar. But he did not know at all whether it was an Ibriyar or was not an Ibriyar. So, why did they make it an Ibriyar? What was the inyan that they made it an Ibriyar? So he says something very interesting. There's a concept, when Moshe Rabbeinu says, "Vayomer Moshe Yeshua b'chalanu anoshim v'tzei hilachem ba'amalek," the Cheskuni al Torah and Rabbeinu Ephraim write, "Anoshim, try to get people who have no mazel." Now, what does that mean? People with no mazel? Every month of the year has a mazel. Adar Sheni has no mazel. Get people who are born during Adar Sheni. Someone who is born during Adar Sheni is not influenced by the mazalos, and they could defeat Amalek. From here we see, says Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshutz, that Mordechai tried very hard Mordechai tried very hard to be ma'aber when he heard that Haman made a gzeira about the upcoming Adar. What he wanted to do was to make that Adar an Iber month, to make a second month. This way it would come out that the gzeira is on a month that has no mazal, and it would be a protection for Klal Yisrael. Okay. Are you allowed to be ma'aber a year if you're not in Eretz Yisrael? It's a very interesting halacha. The Gemara says in Masechta Brachos that if the Iker Sanhedrin is in Chutz La'aretz, they have the koyach to be ma'aber the shana in Chutz La'aretz. However, the Gemara says that if there is someone of equal stature in Eretz Yisrael, you cannot be ma'aber the year in Chutz La'aretz. So says Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshutz, that time, from the time of Koresh HaRishon, who was still in Eretz Yisrael? Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. The Anshe Knesset, Roiv of Anshe Knesset were in Eretz Yisrael at the time. Tafel of a fellow. We tend to think that the majority of the Jewish people were in Galus. Most learn that way. But the Anshe Knesset were still in Eretz Yisrael. And look in the first Ramban of Masechta Megillah. When Koresh issued a decree that the Jewish people could return to Eretz Yisrael before the Purim story, the Ramban says most Jews already returned. Now most Rishonim argue on that. Tosfos in Yevamos Daf Pevav says most Jews did not return. The Ramban is of the opinion that most Jews returned. So you had Chagai, you had Zechariah, you had Malachi, you had Mishael, you had Azariah. And by the way, even Mordechai was in Eretz Yisrael. I saw something yesterday, I flipped. The Targum on the Megillah says, on the Pasuk, Vayhi Oimenes Hadasa, that Mordechai was living in Yerushalayim. And he didn't have to go into Galus with Yechanya. He chose to go into Galus with Yechanya because he had a poor relative, Esther, who had no father and mother, and he said, it's mutav that I should give up of my spirituality living in Eretz Yisrael and go protect this Yisayma. Look at the Targum. Targum Sheni on the words, Vayhi Oimenes Hadasa, Mordechai was Moser Nefesh to take care of this. Yisayim the Chassam Sofer writes in the Zechus that he cared for this orphan. That's why he was Zoicha to be the redeemer of Klal Yisrael. In any event, Mordechai is living in Persia. The Anshe Knesset Agdolos, we're in Eretz Yisrael. Mordechai wants to make it an Iber year. Why? He wants the Gzeira to come out in Adar Sheni. Do you know how long, says Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshutz, it takes to be able to send word to Eretz Yisrael and to let them know to make it an Iber Yar and to get response back? It takes 70 days. Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshutz says it takes 70 days. That's why he was not able to send the message to the Jews to kill their enemies until the 23rd day of Sivan. Why? Because what's he going to write? Kill your enemies when? Which Adar? He had to wait to get back word from Yerushalayim about if they were able to be ma'aber the year, to be able to tell the Jews to know which day to kill their enemies. With the half of a fella. That Mordechai was still subject to the Anshe Knesset Agdola back in Yerushalayim. Okay. With that introduction, Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshutz says, brilliant Ga'ainas. He says like this. As we just mentioned, the Anshe Knesset Hagdola were in Yerushalayim, and they made the months in the year. And it takes time for them to know how many days the previous month was. Now, Adar Rabboisai is La'olam Chasar.
29.
Adar is always 29 days. Why? It happens to be that's usually how it comes out, and how it always came out. There's only one exception. That year. That year, Adam came. Adam did not come on the 30th day. Adam came on the 31st day. So in Shushan, they thought they were fasting. Yud Gimel, Yud Dalet, Tesvav. Because on their calendar, that's what it said. It said Yud Gimel, Yud Dalet, Tesvav. Because to them, Adar's L'olam Chasar. So Nisan, they thought it was Yud Gimel, Yud Dalet, Tesvav. And therefore they thought that what? They were fasting on Pesach and they were not eating matzah. But in reality, the Yibon Shem saved them. And the Yibon Shem made a nes that year Adar was Malay. And really then, they were fasting Yud Beis, Yud Gimel, Yud Daled. And that the night that Achashverosh couldn't sleep was really Leil Pesach. And that means the third day of the fast was Yud Daled. That means no Jew fasted on the first day of Yom Tov. And everybody ate matzah, including Mordechai. But then the pasuk says, "Vayashav Mordechai el Haramel." Right? It says like this: that Chazal say, "Vayashav Mordechai el Haramel shav l'sakel tanisoi." That Mordechai fasted one extra day. But Avada, the fast was Yud Beis, Yud Gimel, Yud Daled. They thought it was Yud Gimel, Yud Daled Tesvav, but really it was Yud Beis, Yud Gimel, Yud Daled. And Mordechai, so that night, the night of Pesach, nobody did anything wrong. Everyone had a beautiful Seder. It was a gorgeous Seder. The next morning, Mordechai was Mavatel what? Yom Tiv. But Avada, he ate matzah. And why only Mordechai? Because the rest of the Jewish people weren't even fasting that night or that day. That's how it. Now, again, this only works out with the Esther Rabbah and the Pirkei Rabbi Elazar that it was 13, 14, 15, and Lefi this mistake, it's pushed a day earlier. But at least we have some mahalach in explaining the chronology. How, yes, so then it comes out like this. So they were fasting Yud Gimel Yud Daled Tes Vav, and then they thought, and then the next day Mordechai was mistakenly learning Hilchos Kmitza, because really what it was Tesvav. Yeah. But that's okay, because it comes out that the rest of Klal Yisrael ate matzah, and the rest of Klal Yisrael were not mevatel the mitzvah of matzah. Take a look at number 14.
Before you say this, isn't there a problem? Now you're saying it's 12, 13, 14.
Yeah.
But the decree came out on the 13th. So how could they be fasting a day before?
The decree came out on the 13th only because on the calendar it said the 13th. The reality was it wasn't. So the reality was the decree was it came out on the 12th. So the reality was that the decree came out on the 12th.
But how did they know?
That's why it took 70 days to know.
That's why they didn't know. They didn't know.
Why did they put it in the Megillah that way?
Because that's the day that it happened on the Persian calendar. And the Jewish calendar. In other words, they didn't know. That's why there's the concept of Sveika D'Yoma. This is Sveika D'Yoma. This is the perfect illustration of why we need a Sveika D'Yoma. Because it took a very long time. It took Taka 70 days. I mean, it's a Pella in the Megillah where, they write on the 13th day of Nisan that they're gonna be killed out. And then it's retracted immediately. Why did it take 70 days until Mordechai rewrote the document? And Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshutz is explaining because he didn't know what date to write until he got word back from Chagei Zechariah Malachi whether it's going to be an extra Adar or not. That's a very interesting approach. Let's read number 14. By the way, according to this, it comes out amazing. That means they fasted the 12th, the 13th, and 14th. The first party was the 14th. The second party was the 15th. Haman's Yahrtzeit, the 15th. Guess what we don't do on the 15th day of Nisan? We don't say Tafnan. So we're machmer on all three. According to the Medrash in Esther Rabbah and Pirkei Rabbi Elazar, Haman's Yahrtzeit is the 17th, and we don't say Tafnan on the 17th day of Nisan. According to the simple reading of Rashi, they fasted on the 13th, 14th, 15th, and Haman died on the 16th. And we don't say Tachnan on the 16th. According to Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshutz, now we have a reason we don't say Tachnan on the 15th day of Nisan either. So, things work out. Okay, look at number 14. Bamru Chazal, Inami Vayavar, Sha'avar Yom Tov Rishon Shel Pesach B'Tainas. V'hainu Kamashu Kosafti, Ki Shloisha Yamim Shagazru, Tzoim, Hayu, Yud Gimel, Yud Daled, Tesvav. The 13th, the 3 days are the 13th, the 14th, the 15th. V'yesh lahavin. Lama davka da'avar Mordechai. Hakol Yisrael avro v'tzamo. Why were you picking on Mordechai? All of Klal Yisrael violated Yom Tov. V'gam mazah denakat esana b'Yom Tov. Why were you saying that he fasted on Yom Tov? There's a man number you're allowed to. Why don't we say worse that he didn't eat matzah on the first day of Yom Tov? Now the Marsha is already oimid on this, and he says they fasted Yud Gimel Yidal Tesvav, and on the night of the 16th is Valayla Shenoda Shnas HaMelech. How's that possible? And the Maharsha says Ein Muktim Meuchar, but Rabbi Yonasan says that's Doichek. Aval Inyan Kach Kvar Kasafti. But I wrote as follows: Ki oz Yashru Bezdin Hagado B'Yishalayim Mamish Roiv Knesses Hagdol Neviim. This is something already quoted, that at that time the majority of Bezdin Hagado in Yishalayim with Roiv Knesses Hagdol and the Neviim were in Yishalayim. Vim Kain Hema Kavu Chadashim Mishanim. They were the ones who made the months and the years. Uv'chutz la'aretz lo yadu zman kviyasam. And in Chutz la'aretz they didn't know when it was established. U'mitchila amrinan dehaya chodesh chasar. At first they thought the month was 29 days. Ulekach b'shushan mistam chashvu la'adar chasar. Umimenu chashvu rosh chodesh nisan b'yom shloshim shal adar. That means the 30th day of Adar they thought was Rosh Chodesh Nisan. V'haya b'yud gimel b'y gzeras Haman. V'tainis Esther yud gimel yadalet tesvav. So he says clearly he's going with the Medrash, not according to Rashi. And they paskin that year they shouldn't eat matzah. So they fasted Yud Gimel Yadal Tesvav, and they thought they were not eating matzah. Ve'emas chashvu l'sanos mebli lecha matzah shel mitzvah eis lasos Hashem. U'v'yom Tesvav nechnasa Esther. U'v'layla achlu Yisrael ki paska hatainis. U'bay b'layla nadid ashnas hamech. They thought that they weren't eating matzah. And that was what? That was the third day of the Tainus. Tesvav. And one night could Achashverosh not sleep? The 16th. Aval me'es Hashem haya. But it was from God. Leval yivatlu Yisrael mi mitzvahs matzah. Hashem didn't want Klal Yisrael to be bought from the mitzvah matzah. So Yonasan believed Knesses Hagdol B'Shaim la'aber adar. That even though, right, even though they never are ma'aber adar, it's la'olam chasar. That year, Hashem engendered in their heart, this year we have to make adar in every month. And Rosh Chodesh Nisan was on the 31st day. And be'emes then, Esther came to the king on the third day, which is Yud Beis Yud Gimel Yadaled. And on the night that the fast was over, Klal Yisrael ate matzah, and that was the night Noded Shnas HaMelech. And that means Haman was hanged on the 15th. The 15th. That means Haman was hanged on the 15th.
That night was the second day.
So you could say, Bo'erev, it was sort of toward the evening on that night, right? On the 15th. Evhu be'emes leil tesvav karoi leil hamashumar. So why are Anshe Knesset Hagdolah saying that Mordechai was over? Because if they fasted, Yud Beis Yud Gimel Yud Daled, and Mordechai didn't do anything wrong. He says, no. If you look in the Yifei Anaf, they all write, Vayoshav Mordechai al Shar HaMelech, Sheshav l'sakoi v'tanisai, Ki Mordechai hechmer l'hoisif u'l'sanois, Af b'yoim tezayin. Mordechai fasted an additional day.
But he thought it was Tezayin.
Afshik, what?
But he thought it was Tezayin.
Really?
Even though it was really Tetvav. That's the truth.
They fasted Yud Beis Yud Gimel Yud Daled. Right, exactly. He thought it was fasting Yud Gimel Yud Daled Tezav, and additionally Tezayin. Afshik kvar Talmud Shloshim Me'atas, V'mkein ha'nisana be'emes b'yoim Tesvav Nisan Shu Yom Tov Doiraisa. And therefore the Torah is made Vayavar Mordechai. Mordechai was over the first day of Yom Tov B'Tainus. Now, one thing doesn't work out according to this. There's another medrash. Now, according to this, it would come out that Haman was hanged on the first day of Pesach, which, by the way, we say in the Haggadah. Look at number 10. Roish mi beis Rasha machatza b'etz chamishim ba'Pesach. So he was hanged on. Now, until now, we would have said he was hanged on the second day, which is also Pesach. It's not a problem, but now it's even better because he was hanged on the first day. Lamaisa, there's now we're saying they fasted 13, 14, 15, but in reality it was 12, 13, 14. Rashi on the Megillah says they fasted what? 14, 15, 16, but in reality it was what? 13, 14, 15. Now, if in reality it was 13, 14, 15, that means Haman was really killed on the 16th. There's a very interesting Taisus, And it's quoted in the Sefer HaTishbi. You know, the Gemara in Chulin says, Haman min ha-Torah minayin. Where is there a remez to Haman? So the Gemara says, Dav Kuf Lamed Tes, Hamin ha'etz. But there's another girsa possibly, and certainly Chazal say, Haman min ha-Torah minayin, vayachilchas Haman. Yeah. Vayachilchas Haman. If you look in the Sefer HaTishbi, Bachur, there's some connection between Haman and the Man. What's the connection between Haman and the Man? So Tosfos, I believe the Moshav Zakenim on Chumash says, they both share one thing in common. You know, when Klal Yisrael entered Eretz Yisrael, it says Vayishbais Haman mimacharas, that the Man stopped when? The day after Pesach, 16th. What's the connection? Haman was hanged on the 16th, and the Man stopped on the 16th. They both stopped. Now that only works, that doesn't work with Rabbi Yonasan's cheshbon, that in reality Haman died on the 15th. But that would work with the other pshat that they fasted 14, 15, and 16. But I'll tell you something interesting just to, as a preparation for Pesach, you know. The Arizal says that Haman was a Gilgal. Who is he a Gilgal of? The Sar HaOifim, the baker. Yeah. Why? How do we know this? They both begin their comments with the word af. The Haman says af lo hevia Esther, and the Sar HaOifim says af bachaloi mi. By the way, you know why they start with af? Because if you take the lamed out of elef to learn, you get af. And Haman tried to remove the lamed. How do we know that? Because Chazal say like this: Kol ha-mevi, kol ha-omer davar b'shem amroi, mevi gula la'olam. So the question is, why kol ha-omer davar b'shem amroi, mevi gula la'olam? So then Ishchai says, you know, if somebody says over their own Torah, somebody says over someone else's Torah in their name, so what midah is that? Gava. But if you're learning it lishma, with lamed represents limud lishma, so you put the lamed in gaiva, you get geula. But Haman was trying to remove the lamed, and therefore he takes the lamed out of elef, af lo hiviasa. So Haman was the Gilgal of the Sar HaOifim. Interesting, they both have the same end. They were both hanged, the Sar HaOifim and Haman. It's interesting. Haman was hanged on Pesach. And, you know, the baker who's trying to bring too much chametz into the world is also hanged on Pesach. I mean, what else you can do with a baker, you know? So it comes out, you know, here we are, and we have three possible Yahrtzeits for Haman. We have the 15th, the 16th, the 17th. You know, it could get confusing. It could be maybe the whole Nisan you shouldn't say it's happening already, right? But certainly, you know, we're not interested in Haman. And, you know, we like bakers, but they don't necessarily work out for us as the Yontif of Pesach is approaching. So this should be a good hakdama to Pesach. Haba aleinu l'tayvah.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.